Madison County 911. Where's your emergency?
My wife just stabbed herself. There's no pulse. There's blood all over the place.
New tonight, the 911 call from a husband in Madison County. He claimed his wife took her own life, but now he is charged in her death. Those charges are the result of a months-long investigation. Police say Kyle Long made that 911 call you just heard back in October.
There are some people in this world who just make a place feel warmer. The kind of person who remembers your name, your dog's name, and asks how both of you are doing. Rachel Long was that kind of person. She was born on December 22nd, 1992, right there in Columbus, Ohio. But it was the nearby town of London, a quiet, small city just west of Columbus, that she truly called home. London is one of those Midwestern towns where people know each other, where neighbors wave from their porches, and the same families have lived on the same streets for generations. It was the kind of place where community actually meant something. Rachel grew up there. She went through local schools, graduated from London High School in 2011, and when the time came to decide what to do with her life, she stayed. She didn't chase the bright lights of a bigger city. She chose her people. She chose her roots. And there's something quietly beautiful about that if you think about it. As she settled into adult life, Rachel found her calling in something she genuinely loved: animals. If you've ever met someone who truly has a gift with animals, you know exactly the kind of warmth and patience that takes. Rachel had it. She eventually turned that love into something real, something she built with her own hands, a business called Pawfect Pups Grooming and Boarding. Think about what that means. She didn't just show up to work. She created work. She built relationships with pet owners across the whole community. People trusted her with their animals, and that kind of trust is earned, not given. Through that business, Rachel became a familiar face, a dependable presence, someone people in London and Madison County knew they could count on. And it wasn't just the paying customers. Rachel was also active in dog rescue work. When an animal needed shelter, she showed up. When something needed care, she provided it. That tells you a lot about who she was as a person, not just professionally, but in her soul. Outside of work, she had a full life too. She loved reading books. She loved rock music and going to live concerts. She loved being around animals even when she wasn't working. These were the things that made Rachel, Rachel, a woman with simple joys, deep roots, and a generous heart. She was also a wife and a mother. She and her husband Kyle Long had built a life together in London, Ohio, a home, 2 daughters, nearly a decade of marriage. From the outside looking in, it probably seemed like a normal family, like any household you'd pass on a Sunday drive without thinking twice. But behind closed doors, things had started to change. And what happened next is something that shook that quiet Midwestern town to its core. Every marriage has its private seasons. There are the good years, the ones full of laughter and shared dreams, and then sometimes, quietly, almost without anyone noticing, things begin to shift. By the time we reach October of 2025, the marriage between Rachel Long and Kyle Long had entered a very different kind of season. Kyle was 35 years old at the time. The two of them were still living together in their home in Madison County, still raising their 2 daughters under the same roof. To anyone looking in from the outside, the picture might have seemed ordinary enough. A husband, a wife, a family home, kids in the house. But what was happening behind that picture was something else entirely. Rachel had made a decision. A hard one. The kind that takes a lot of quiet courage, especially when children are involved, especially when you've spent nearly 10 years building a life with someone. She had told Kyle she wanted a separation. We don't know exactly when that conversation happened. Investigators never released the specific date. But we do know it happened sometime before October 2025. And we know, based on what her friends later told investigators, that it wasn't something Rachel had said in a moment of anger or impulse. This was a considered decision. A woman looking at her life, looking at her future, and making a choice for herself. Her friends described her as someone who was moving forward. Someone who had already started thinking about what her life would look like on the other side of this. She talked to people close to her about the possibility of becoming a single parent. about building a new routine for herself and her daughters, about starting fresh. That matters. That detail matters more than it might seem at first. Because when investigators later looked at what happened to Rachel, one of the questions they had to ask was whether this could have been suicide. And the answer her own life gave them, the plans she was making, the future she was looking toward, said clearly, no. This was not a woman walking toward an ending. This was a woman walking toward a new beginning. She had hope. She had direction. She had people she loved and plans to keep going. But on October 23, 2025, Rachel Long never got the chance to start that new chapter. Whatever she had been looking forward to, whatever future she had been quietly building in her mind, it was taken from her on an otherwise ordinary Thursday afternoon. And the story of how that happened begins with a phone call that raised more questions than it answered. October 23, 2025. A Thursday. An ordinary autumn day in London, Ohio. Rachel finished her work and came home in the early afternoon, just after 4 p.m., according to investigators who later pieced together the timeline. She walked into the house that she and Kyle shared with their daughters. She went into the master bathroom. And then, by Kyle Long's own account, everything fell apart. Kyle told investigators that at some point while Rachel was in the bathroom, he was sitting at a desk in another room,
just going about his day.
And then he said he heard something strange coming from the direction of the bathroom. He described the sounds as first laughter and then screaming. Concerned, he said he got up and walked toward the bathroom. What he claimed to have seen when he got there is one of the most disturbing things you can imagine. He told investigators that when he opened the door, he found Rachel stabbing herself, repeatedly, in the face and neck.
He said he watched this happen.
And then he called 911. Now, let's sit with that for a moment, because this is where things start to get complicated. When investigators later went through the phone records, they found something that Kyle had not mentioned. There were actually 2 calls made from his phone that evening, not one. The first call failed to connect and was disconnected. The second call, placed roughly 4 minutes later, was the one that went through to the dispatcher. 4 minutes. In an emergency, 4 minutes is a very long time. If someone you love is bleeding out in your bathroom, 4 minutes is an eternity. When investigators asked Kyle about the 2 calls, he said he had only made one. He didn't account for the first call. He didn't explain the gap. That discrepancy, that quiet 4-minute window that he couldn't explain, became one of the first threads investigators began to pull. When emergency responders finally arrived at the house, they found Rachel on the floor of the master bathroom. She was near the toilet. There was blood, a significant amount of it, surrounding her body. She had multiple visible stab wounds. Despite everything the emergency personnel tried to do for her, Rachel Long was pronounced dead at the scene. She was 32 years old. Her 2 daughters had a mother when the morning began. By the time the sun started to go down, they didn't. The bathroom was treated as a crime scene. Technicians came in, photographed everything, documented the position of Rachel's body, and collected evidence. A knife was recovered at the scene. And while investigators initially kept open the possibility that Rachel's death could have been self-inflicted, what the evidence showed them next made that explanation very hard to believe. There are moments in an investigation when the physical evidence speaks louder than any witness ever could. When the story the body tells contradicts the story a person tells. And in Rachel Long's case, that is exactly what happened. Rachel's body was taken to the Montgomery County Coroner's Office, where a detailed autopsy was carried out by medical examiners. These are professionals whose job is to look past the surface, to read what happened in the final moments of someone's life through the language of wounds and tissue and bone. What they found was this: Rachel Long had suffered at least 17 sharp force injuries. 17. The wounds were spread across multiple parts of her body, her neck, her face, her arms, and her hands. That alone is significant. But it was the injuries on her hands that told the clearest story of all. Some of the wounds on Rachel's hands were identified as defensive wounds. If you're not familiar with that term, here is what it means. Defensive wounds occur when a person tries to protect themselves. When someone is being attacked and they raise their hands, instinctively, desperately, to block the blows coming at them. The hands get cut in that process. It's a reflex as old as human survival itself. You cannot give yourself defensive wounds. That is the nature of them. They are, by definition, the wounds of someone fighting back against another person. And yet Kyle Long had told investigators that Rachel had stabbed herself. The medical examiners looked at 17 wounds. They looked at defensive injuries on both hands. They looked at the locations, the neck, the face, the arms. And they reached a conclusion that could not be avoided. Following the autopsy and a review of all the evidence collected at the scene, the Montgomery County coroner ruled Rachel Long's death a homicide. Not a suicide. Not an accident. A homicide. Someone had done this to her. Someone had been in that bathroom. Someone had stood over her and inflicted those 17 wounds while she fought back with her hands to try to stop them. Now think back to what we know. Think about the fact that Kyle said he only made one phone call, but the record showed 2, with 4 minutes unaccounted for. Think about the fact that Rachel had just told Kyle she wanted a separation. Think about the fact that she had been making plans, talking to friends, looking forward to a new life. Think about the fact that the two of them were alone in that house when all of this happened. Investigators thought about all of those things too. And as each piece of evidence fell into place, the case that had begun as a suspicious death was becoming something much more serious. The quiet town of London, Ohio, a place where people know each other, where generations of families have shared streets and stories, was about to learn that the thing it had most feared had happened in one of its own homes. There is a particular kind of grief that comes when someone is taken too soon. When a life is cut off not by illness or age or the quiet, natural end that most of us hope for, but by violence, by the choice of another person. That grief has a different weight to it. It carries not just sadness, but anger. Not just loss, but injustice. Rachel Long was 32 years old. She had 2 little girls. She had a business she had built herself. She had a community that knew her face, trusted her with their animals, and counted on her presence. She had friends she confided in about her future. She had books she hadn't finished reading. Concerts she hadn't been to yet. Animals she had plans to rescue. She had a whole life still in front of her. And then, on an ordinary October afternoon, in the home she shared with her family, all of that was taken away. What the medical examiner's report told the world was something her friends already knew in their hearts. Rachel did not do this to herself. A woman making plans for the future, talking to friends about becoming a single parent, excited about what came next, that is not a woman on the edge of ending her life. That is a woman standing at the beginning of something new. The autopsy confirmed what the evidence had been saying all along. 17 wounds. Defensive injuries on her hands. A ruling of homicide. And the details that didn't add up, the 2 phone calls instead of 1, the 4-minute gap that Kyle couldn't explain, the story about laughter and screaming and watching his wife stab herself, all of it became part of an investigation that would continue long after that October afternoon. For the people who loved Rachel, her daughters, her family, her friends, the community in London that had watched her build her business and rescue animals and live a full, kind life, the path forward from here is one of seeking answers. Seeking justice. Making sure that what happened to Rachel is not buried under a story that doesn't hold together. Cases like this remind us of something important. They remind us that the truth is stubborn. That physical evidence doesn't lie the way people sometimes do. That a woman's wounds can speak on her behalf long after she is gone. Rachel Long deserved to begin the new chapter of her life that she had been quietly planning. She deserved to raise her daughters, run her business, read her books, go to her concerts, and take in every stray animal that crossed her path. She deserved every bit of the future she was looking forward to. We remember her not as a victim, though the law will rightly call her that, but as a woman who is deeply loved, who loved deeply in return, and whose life mattered far beyond what happened in that bathroom on October 23, 2025. May the truth continue to come to light, and may Rachel Long finally get the justice she deserves. Thanks for watching. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from.